Hello, and welcome to Vancouver, British Columbia. We've hopped on a bus from Seattle heading north, and we've just crossed the border to Canada. Now, this is my first time in Canada. I've heard a lot about it, but I've never been here before. So join me while we explore the city and some of its most famous sites. And speaking of famous sites, the bus has dropped us off right next to the Science World building. This funky building, with that dome on top of it, was built to be the expo center for the World's Fair in 1986, and today it serves as a science museum for kids and adults alike. Science World is surrounded by Falls Creek, which runs through the middle of the city. Here you can get some incredible views of downtown Vancouver. As you can see, this area is filled with people going on their morning runs and hanging out on the water. And you can't blame them, this place is beautiful. Now, unsurprisingly, Vancouver was founded by British colonists only about 1.5 centuries ago. Before that, this area was mainly inhabited by the Coast Salish peoples. What's interesting though, is that this city was practically founded by a bartender. But more on that later. Now let's move on to check out downtown. We're here at the entrance to downtown, and right next to us is the BC Place, one of the largest stadiums in Canada. The hostel I booked is downtown, so before we do anything, I'm gonna go drop off my bag there. It is about a 15-minute walk from here though, so let's explore a bit of the city on the way. The downtown area feels like a typical North American downtown area, with skyscrapers dominating the cityscape. Here's this pretty interesting one I noticed on my way. Upon first impressions, I'm actually quite surprised by how clean the streets are. They've also included a lot of greenery, with trees lining the streets, which I think is pretty nice. Now, Vancouver is actually often ranked as one of the most livable cities in the world. If you ever look at a list ranking the best cities in the world, chances are that Vancouver is going to be quite high up on that list. On the other hand, Vancouver is also infamous for having one of the highest costs of living in the entire world. Now, I'm not paying rent here, so I can't really weigh in on that, but I will say that this city does look pretty nice. So on my way, I noticed this plaque denoting these old buildings from the early 1900s. These wooden houses next to all these skyscrapers, I think, is a pretty surreal sight. The downtown is a mix of buildings from all decades from the past 100 years, which keeps it from feeling too samey. Here's another interesting thing I found. This is a very typical type of building you'll see all over Vancouver. Here you have a building with the base consisting of commercial real estate and a residential tower on top, allowing both to exist in the same place. This type of urban planning even has its own name, Vancouverism. Alright, I've stopped by my hostel to drop off my bag, and I think next we're gonna go check out some of the other famous neighborhoods in the city. Now, Vancouver is Canada's third largest city after Toronto and Montreal, and British Columbia is sort of like Canada's California, known for its good weather. In the same way, Vancouver is kinda like Canada's Los Angeles as well, as it is actually a major hub for the film and television industries. I guess it's also kinda similar to California with its high housing costs. We're now in the West End neighborhood, just next to downtown. This area was originally built as the first upscale neighborhood in the city. See, when the railroad first arrived in Vancouver, all the rich railroad families wanted a place to live away from the common rabble in what is now downtown. So they built this place, which is why you can still see some older upper-class mansions in this neighborhood. Eventually, the rich people moved away to the other side of Falls Creek, and this neighborhood became more of a middle-class neighborhood. Today, it's a trendy and lively part of the city, where you can see some older wooden mansions against the backdrop of modern skyscrapers. The West End is a lot quieter compared to downtown, which is just a couple blocks away, and this has made it a very popular area to live in the city. It's quiet, but still close to everything. I imagine the rents here though must be astronomical. The neighborhood is filled with cute little parks like this, making it perfect for a little morning or afternoon walk. Here's one thing I love about Vancouver. The mountain range north of the city can be seen from most parts of Vancouver, giving the city this dual character of modern high-rise buildings right next to some incredible nature vistas. We've now reached the northern end of West End, and right next to us is the famous Stanley Park, one of the most incredible urban parks in the world. However, today, I don't think we have enough time left to give it justice, so we'll come back tomorrow. Instead, next, let's visit another of Vancouver's famous neighborhoods. This is Harbour, on the northern shore of Vancouver, known for its impressive skyline of high-end residential towers. The neighborhood, unsurprisingly, got its name when coal was found in the harbour, and today it's known for its numerous glass towers that have been dotted around the neighborhood, giving it one of the most impressive skylines in the city. I don't know why they needed to put this many Canadian flags here, but to be fair, it's a pretty cool flag, so I guess they have a point. Here's another thing Harbour is famous for, the marina. Here Here you can hang out next to the Burrard Inlet with the mountains just across the water and the city skyline behind you, making this one of the coolest spots in the city in my opinion. Just across the water, you can see North Vancouver, which is technically a different city, but is a part of the Vancouver metropolitan area. Just sit down for a second and take in the vibes of this place. Let's continue walking down the northern shore along the Coal Harbour Seaside Park, and the views from this place are just incredible. Next, I actually want to go to that building right there. This Hobbit House looking building is the Vancouver Convention Center. It was built in 2009 to serve as the main press center for the 2010 Winter Olympics and has since been repurposed as a convention center. The views from up here are some of the best ones in the city. Vancouver was the third city in Canada to host the Olympics in 2010, the country having hosted them previously in Montreal in 1976 and in Calgary in 1988. What's probably the most memorable for Canadians though was that they won gold in both the men's and women's ice hockey tournaments after beating the US in both finals. On the plaza on top of the convention center, they have a replica of the Olympics cauldron used in the opening ceremony. Anyway, next I want to take you to another one of Vancouver's iconic buildings, which is actually just next to the convention center. This is Canada Place, the city's main cruise ship passenger terminal. From here you can hop on a cruise ship that'll take you all the way to Alaska. We're not gonna be doing that today though. Maybe some other time. The building was first built for the 1986 World Expo, but it has renovated a few times since, most recently for the 2010 Olympics. Now, Canada Place is a great spot to get some incredible views of the Burrard Inlet, but also the skyline of the city, and the pier is free to walk on, which is always great. As the sun is starting to go down, I think this is a pretty good place to end our day. We'll explore more of the city tomorrow. Good morning, and hello from Davie Street. I'm on my way to our next major location in Vancouver, which is actually on the other side of the city, so we'll be walking through the West End again. A fun fact about this street here, Davie Street, is that it's actually the center for the city's gay community, which is why there are these rainbow crosswalks. Let's continue down this road to our main destination today. I don't really know what this sculpture is supposed to be, but I gotta say, it's a little creepy. Here's another place I want to talk about on our way. This is the English Bay Seafront, yet another place in the city with some beautiful vistas. Now, Vancouver is a huge port city, and here we can see some cargo ships waiting for their turn to dock. And we've finally arrived. This is Stanley Park, one of the most famous urban parks in the world, and the main location for us today. I wanted to come here in the morning so that we'd have enough time, because this place is massive. It's about 400 hectares, or about 1,000 acres, and it's about the same size as all of downtown Vancouver. We're not gonna explore all of it by any means, but I do hope to visit a decent chunk of it today. Unlike most urban parks, Stanley Park is densely forested, as the city wanted to mostly preserve what the area looked like before the city was founded in the 1800s. The park is full of little streams and lakes, with local wildlife roaming about. For example, there's some ducks right there. Now, this park was settled by local First Nation peoples for thousands of years before European colonization. When the Europeans arrived in the 1860s, some of them decided to build small settlements in the park as well. Now, in 1886, the city of Vancouver decided to turn this area into a public park, despite all the people living here. But they actually let some of the residents stay here for the remainder of their lives. The last indigenous person lived in the park until the 1920s, and the last resident lived here until 1958. We've now arrived at the Lost Lagoon, standing at the entrance to the park. This artificial lake was created when the causeway running through the park cut it off from the Burrard Inlet. The name Lost Lagoon comes from the 1911 poem written by Canadian poet Pauline Johnson, who felt like the inlet almost disappeared during low tide. Today, the lake is home to a lot of different local bird species, such as geese, ducks, and herons. For example, here's some trying to catch some fish. I also tried to catch a video of this heron catching a fish, but it just wouldn't do it. Until I stopped filming, of course. This little lake is one of my favorite places in this park. It's nice and calm, and offers some great views. Anyway, let's keep moving along the lake, along this little path that's been set up next to it. This park is actually surprisingly not crowded, despite it being a warm summer day. So far, the only person I've run into was this Australian lady who came to ask me for directions. Unluckily for her, I'm also a tourist, so I wasn't much help. Alright, we've now made it to the entrance to the park. And this area here is a bit more of a conventional garden style park, instead of the dense forest that the rest of the park is known for. So here's the guy that this park was named for, Lord Stanley. He He was the Governor General of Canada from 1888 to 1893, and if you follow hockey, you'll also know him as the guy who created the Stanley Cup. The park was actually opened the year he became Governor General, which is why it was named in his honor. We're now at the eastern seawall of the park, where we can get some great views of the cool Harbour neighborhood we visited yesterday. From here, you can really see why Vancouver has gained the nickname City of Glass. Now, you've probably heard of totem poles before, but at least if you were like me, you probably didn't know they originate from the Pacific Northwest region of the US and Canada. And Stanley Park is home to a collection of these local First Nation totem poles, which is actually the most visited tourist attraction in British Columbia. We're now at the northern shore of the park. That down there is Lionsgate Bridge, which connects Vancouver to the suburbs on the northern bank of the inlet. Here we can also get yet more incredible views of the mountains north of the city. It's hard to pick my favorite viewpoint in the city because there's so many great ones. Now, an interesting fact about this place is that this is where the city of Vancouver almost got its start. See, in the 1860s, a lumber mill was set up here, the first one in what is now Vancouver. However, the waters here weren't great for a port, so the mill had to be relocated a few kilometers down the coast. That mill then eventually grew into the city that we've been visiting for the past 2 days. Had the waters here just been a little more convenient though, and this area could have been where downtown Vancouver would be located today. Instead, the city sprung up here. Sorry for the abrupt jump cut, but I've now traveled to the oldest part of the city, Gastown. We'll come back to the name later, but this is the area where that mill was relocated to in the 1860s. Now, of course, the mill needed workers to operate, and for that, they set up some employee lodgings a short walk to the east from here. Now, the problem for the workers was that alcohol wasn't allowed on company premises. I know, terrible. So a bartender by the name of Gassy Jack set up a saloon here, just outside of the mill's property, to serve all these customers. Well, some of the workers had the smart idea to build their house next to the saloon, and soon a small settlement had sprung up. This little town was then named Gassy's Town after the saloon owner, later being shortened to just Gastown. And Gastown became the epicenter around which the whole city would grow around. So in a sense, Vancouver was founded by a bartender right here in Gastown. This here is actually the most famous landmark in Gastown, the Gastown steam clock. Now, it might look like it's from the 1800s, but it was actually built in 1977 to cover a steam grate. Overall, Gastown is a charming neighborhood with a lot of historical buildings, but I think that's gonna bring our trip to the city to an end. Vancouver is a beautiful city with some striking architecture and beautiful nature vistas. I can definitely see why people like this city so much. Anyway, I'm gonna hop back on the bus and travel to our next destination. See you in the next episode.